How long does it take for senior executives at a corporation to realize that one of their managers is just the wrong person for the job? When I look at Dan Dido's tenure at DC Comics, it is clear to me that he is the absolute wrong person for the job. Ever since he became editor in chief in 2002 and then later co publisher of DC Comics, the DC Comics brand has been in a steady decline. And it is clear to me that he is the absolute wrong person to be running the DC Comics brand. And one of the primary reasons why he is the wrong person to be running the DC Comics brand is because he has absolutely no publishing experience. So he does not understand how the business of publishing operates and how to approach the business of publishing. The business of publishing requires someone who understands how the three lists in publishing work. And these lists include the front list, which are your best sellers and books that are anticipated to sell, your backlist books, which are your previous bestsellers, and you need to have a good understanding of how to manage mid-list characters so that they will elevate themselves to become front list characters and backlist bestsellers. Unfortunately, Mr. Dido has no understanding of how that business works, and this is why he is heavily focused on things like big events and gimmicks and mega crossovers. These types of publications, yes, they get good short term sales, but long term, they are very, very poor sellers because they don't do strong backlist sales and they do not help elevate mid list characters up to that front list status. And this is one of the big problems that Dan Dido has because, again, he has no understanding of how the publication business works. He doesn't understand the long term of it. In order to understand publishing, you have to be in the trenches producing publications on a regular basis. And when you do that for a long term, you understand how to manage a front list catalog, a backlist catalog, and then you learn how to elevate mid list characters or new characters so that they can become the next bestseller. Unfortunately, Dan Dido has had over 14 years to try to learn this business, and it's clear to me he is not picking up how to do it because instead of trying to learn how to navigate these courses, what he does is when he makes mistakes, he tries to find ways to fix them, and he tries to fix them with events, and that's not how you fix um, publishing mistakes. A seasoned publisher is going to just tell you, look, you've written a bad story, then you need to put a period at the end of it and move on. Instead, we've seen at DC Comics this vicious cycle of event after event to try to correct things, and the events only lead to a downward spiral. And that downward spiral reached the climax with the New 52 in 2011, where all of the mistakes that he made from 2002 to about 2011 with Flashpoint reached that climax where they decided to create a New 52 universe, which led to the eventual 5 year decline in sales at DC Comics after the short burst sales of that New 52. And right now, DC Comics is not in a position to be competitive thanks to these poor publication decisions. And right now, DC Comics has lost 10% of its market share, and customers are now considering other brands outside of your DC Comics to buy. Many are now trying Marvel Comics, or in many cases, now they're trying independent publications. And that is all due to Dan Dido's mismanagement of the DC Comics brand. Now, many will say that Dan Dido wasn't alone, and I'll agree with them. He had the support of two other individuals who have no real understanding of the publication business. The first is Jim Lee, who pretty much ran his own Wildstorm brand into the ground because he, again, had no understanding of how to manage a catalog of characters or a list of characters. And the second person is Bob Harras, who pretty much almost destroyed Marvel's brand with his own reboot strategy back in 1997. So you have three individuals who have no understanding of how the publishing business works, running a major brand, and showing the world they just aren't qualified in the jobs that they're doing, and that they do not understand how to manage one of the best catalogs of characters as it relates to comics. When it comes down to comics, you have Superman, Batman, The Flash, Green Arrow, all these great characters at DC Comics. Unfortunately, because you do not have a good brand manager there, or to edit, to as an editor in chief and publisher, to understand how to manage the brand, these characters are becoming lost in all of these constant reboots, constant relaunches that confuse customers and frustrate them when they go to the comic shop to go and try to find their favorite characters. Because with each reboot and relaunch, customers become more frustrated, more confused, and more angry because they pretty much cannot find a simple Superman story or a simple Batman story. And that really prevents new readers from reaching the characters and accessing the characters, because what they're doing is keeping to try to fix all the problems that they made before, because again, they do not understand the publishing business, they do not understand the publishing models, and they do not understand the approaches of managing a catalog of characters and a catalog of publications. The hardest way to get readers is to keep canceling. For example, I could think about many other publications which are relaunched recently, like your Playboy magazine, which decided they didn't want to do non-nude pictorials. Now, they didn't just say we're canceling Playboy, they just said we're going in a different direction. And I can think about 1993 when Vogue decided to go in a new direction. They didn't cancel Vogue, they just said we're going in a new direction. But at DC Comics, their idea of solution was to just keep relaunching with a brand new universe. And that makes it very hard for not only new customers to access the DC universe of characters, but older readers to access the universe. And I look at that strategy, and it's beginning to become a failure these days, because instead of customers becoming excited for DC Comics products, they're becoming indifferent. And in the business world, indifference is the kiss of death. When people become indifferent about a brand, that means they don't care anymore. And I look at recent announcements for recent relaunches like your Convergence and the recent new one talking about Rebirth, and instead of people becoming excited for the DC Comics brand, people are becoming, again, indifferent, and they don't care. And they're saying that they're not interested in buying the comics. And I have to ask Warner Brothers executives this: how long do you have to stand behind Dan Dido? I mean, 14 years, as I see it, is far too long. I would have fired this guy back in 2003 or 2004 when he decided he wanted to put a rape in Identity Crisis. That's when I would have given him his walking papers, because that material was inappropriate for the DC Comics brand then, and it showed that he was not the right person for the job. And I look at the declining sales, and in any other company, this man would have been terminated within 3 to 5 years, because that company would have looked at the declining sales for their brand, the alienated customers for their brand, and they would have looked at that big picture and said, we need to get this ship right, and we need to get things better sooner rather than later. And we have no time to continue supporting someone who has shown that they are a proven failure. Moreover, in the business world, in any other company, they would have looked at this man and said, he has no publishing experience. We really should not have this guy managing our catalog of one of our most important catalogs. We really need to get a seasoned publishing professional who understands the business of publishing and understands the long-term ramifications of business decisions. And this is what I believe DC Comics really needs right now. They need a seasoned publishing professional with a strong publishing background, strong publishing experience, and someone who genuinely cares about rebuilding this brand, really cares about these characters, and wants to reach that next generation of readers. Because as it stands right now, the DC Comics brand is not in a position to be competitive, especially when you think about policies that Mr. Dido is getting ready to implement with this Rebirth, where he's talking about a 2-year storyline. I have heard from other professionals in articles like your Eric Larsons and people at Image Comics, and even your Norm Brayfogle, a former penciler, saying that this is one of the worst business ideas ever. And as a publisher myself, I would go on to say it's a ridiculous concept, because you cannot expect people to continue buying a whole host of comics over 2 years to see a storyline finish, when they can go and watch a Netflix TV show and watch the entire season in a day, or they can wait for an entire year to watch one of your other TV shows to finish up. This is just not a competitive business idea, and it's not an effective business idea, and it shows that this, again, Dan Dido is the wrong person to be running the DC Comics brand. And it's time to give this man his walking papers. It's time to give his supporters like Jim Lee and Bob Harras their walking papers. And it's time to create a new direction for the DC Comics brand so that it can start rebuilding and start working towards becoming more competitive with other publication brands, and even create a platform for products like your cinematic movies and your other television shows. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.